Trevan, would you like to maybe give us a little background? And when do you believe this slow fade started in your life? And maybe fill us in on what that looked like so everybody understands what your journey has been like.
Okay. What we'll share a lot about today is my addiction with drugs and alcohol. The first time I drank was when I was 12. So from 12 to 19, I used and drank quite a bit. And then I had about 8 years of sobriety. Only 2 of those were really spent in what we call recovery, where I was working on myself, being here and being with the men in this room and being guided on how to live a godly life. So the slow fade started, 2 years probably into my recovery. And I think somewhere in there I thought I got this. I was fixed. I didn't, I was no longer an alcoholic, and I didn't even know I was an alcoholic at the time. I didn't know I was an addict. So really, over the last 5 years, I got prescribed some medication for anxiety. Rachel was very hesitant on me taking those, knowing that I had an addictive personality, that with the addictions in the past, that it may not end so well for me. And it was good for a few months, but ultimately, just to kind of keep it short, because we'll dive into that, about a year into that addiction, I switched it out for alcohol, thinking, well, I just won't be a pillhead. I'll just use alcohol to suppress what I feel and to keep from feeling.
What were some of the contributing factors that you felt you were trying to numb and overcome with these things? What were some of the things that you felt you were struggling with? If you don't want to get into too much detail, that's fine. But I know that you've talked about this, and I just want people to understand, some people are sitting out there right now going, I thought I was the only one. And when they hear this story, they'll recognize some of the telltale signs in their own lives about what you've gone through.
So for me, there was a lot of mental abuse growing up. There was some sexual abuse, a lot of suppressed feelings, a lot of confusion going on in my life. And I really suppressed that probably by the time I got into adulthood, thinking I need to be fixed. I need to be perceived as the person that the church sees me as. I need to be perceived as the person that my wife wants to have as a husband. And the truth was, I was hurting. When I went into treatment, I was hurt. I didn't realize how hurt, how angry I really was until you make a list and you write down every resentment you have, and you're 8 pages in, and you're thinking, well, I might be a little angry. But then I realized, it was okay. It was okay to hurt. There was a lot of things, if I got honest with God, if I said, God, just take this from me. Let me surrender these feelings from when I was 5, these hurts when I was 6, and any time else in my life, like, God, just take this from me.
What had you gotten to? What was the consumption rate that you had? What were some of the things that you were taking? Just for them to understand the idea that the fact that you're even still alive and breathing right now is nothing short of miraculous.
So, it started with a single drink. Literally, a single drink was my slippery slope. And I just want to share this ahead of time. I know I'm at the point where I probably have a lot of drinks and drugs left in me, but I don't think I have another sober left in me. So what the consumption looked like, as it gradually grew to 1 to 2 to many, the end result was drinking a fifth of whiskey with a bottle of wine, with a single individual shot of whiskey, and 2 to 3 to 4 tall boys. What your blood alcohol rate is, 0.8 is the legal rate, and I would have been blowing between 0.6 and 0.8 at times, 8 to 9 times the legal limit. And that was definitely a weekly. By the last 2 weeks, it was a nightly basis, and drinking all through the week.
What Trevan, what caused you to finally come to the point where you said enough is enough? What kind of intervention was necessary to bring you to that point? What brought you to that point where you finally admitted the fact that you had an issue and a problem? I know that you had a friend speak to you first and you didn't heed what he said to you, but then what caused you to finally make this decision?
So I was to the point where, you get to a point where you can't hide anything. People around you, they start realizing that you're phony, that you're not consistent in the words you say, you're not where you say you're going to be. And so I wasn't even trying to reach out, and there were conversations that would have, and I'd just say, hey, I'm struggling with alcohol, and there was so much baggage that built up. So what one particular night looked like, it took two men being the church, a wife being the church, Denny and Pat coming and just being honest with me. At the moment, I didn't want to hear about God, and I've told them, I've shared many times that if I knew where I was going was a Christ-based facility, I would have put up a bigger fight. Caught me a little off guard, but obviously it was the greatest thing that's ever happened in my life. The hardest decision, but it took honesty, it took love. I really didn't want to hear about love either, because I knew it. I knew how much those around me loved me. I knew how much this room loved me. For me, what I needed to hear was the physiology of what was happening with my body. My liver was failing. I'd went out to lunch with a doctor, and I think he was going to give me some sound advice on what was happening in my body, and I was just so full of myself, he couldn't even utter the words, and pretty much we took it as a lost cause. Like, he knew if he shared, I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to change. And so that moment was just Denny and Pat and Rachel coming to me in love, just with honesty, saying, listen, if you stay in your addiction, what little you have is going to be gone. People already know you don't have to be phony about it, but you're going to die. And that got my attention.
So as we were traveling I know there was a moment you just released everything while we were sitting there in the den in your room, and I think finally getting it out was the beginning of a process. What did you feel as we were traveling? I know you made a lot of calls and everything at work and everything else to let people know what was going on. And by the way, I need to say, the place you work is incredible. The way they've backed you up and they've walked you through. I wish more people took the time and the effort to invest in their associates and their employees the way the nation did with you. And I'm incredibly grateful for the men and women that saw your value beyond what was happening at that moment, and not only helped with you getting to this facility with the finances to help cover some of those things, but also with keeping everything intact for you to come back to it. But as you were leaving and making those phone calls, which you didn't know what the end result would be of those phone calls, you had no idea. What was the feeling as we started moving towards that hospital where we took you that evening? And what did you feel start happening in your heart and mind? Because we met another young man there at the hospital too.
The very first phone call was to my boss to declare amnesty, of saying, listen, I have a problem with alcohol. I'm going to go to treatment. I have no idea what this looks like. And my wife's had my bags packed for months. She's been on the phone with treatment centers, and when detox centers are calling your wife to see if today's the day, those usually aren't very good signs. So the first call was to my boss, and I thought, this will be a little awkward conversation. And of course, in 5 seconds, I'm bawling. And then as we're driving to detox, Denny drove me there. The calls were me being honest and me being very open to others, of saying, listen, I have a problem. And at the time I was probably pretty ashamed of it, but the release of all the pressure that had built up, the shame started leaving, the guilt began to leave, of saying, like, man, I don't feel as bad admitting that I need help, without realizing I was needing help. And so that was, for me, what release was the shame. And then I started to feel love. I got to, from the moment I told Denny that the hardest words I've ever said were 3 letters, harder than my marriage. Because in my marriage, I was on top of the world. Things were great. I was marrying my best friend. Being on the complete opposite end of saying, yes, I'll accept help from another human being when I don't want it, because I thought by accepting this help, before I said yes, I thought accepting help made God inadequate. I thought it made me inadequate as a man with a lot of things that culture has brought me up to be this strong individual that, the truth is, I'm not. I'm not that powerful. And today I can sit here and I'm so grateful for that. So grateful that it's God's power that's allowed me to be here. It's His strength, His love, the hope that He's given me. I mean, that's what today is about. It's just a celebration of what God's done. Nothing that I've done. I did a little work, but truth is, it's God.
Well, I know it took a lot of work. So when you got to the hospital, there was an aha moment for you, a moment when all of us stepped away, and there was something that God finally affirmed in your heart that you were doing the right thing. You want to walk us through what that felt like?
So we prayed in my bed, and in this particular detox, it was just me, no roommate. The doctors and nurses were great, but they didn't really check on me. They kept saying like, "Oh, you're one of the best patients we've ever had. You don't ask for anything." And I'm thinking like, of course I'm not going to ask for anything. I mean, I think the evidence in my life has shown I don't really ask for help. But the moment I think everything truly got real, I was on a FaceTime with Rachel and the girls. Parker, one of our 2-year-old twins, asked Daddy, "Will you hold me?" And knowing that I physically couldn't hold her, that this was real, this was really happening, to me, that moment changed everything. But I knew I was getting help. I knew I was exactly where I needed to be, even if that meant away from my family. That's exactly where my family needed to be.
So a few days into this, they release you from there. You asked Rachel to take you, which there in itself was a miracle, because you had the addiction you had pushed her so far away that you didn't even know if you at that moment even loved her or anything. But there was something deep inside of you that realized you did. But she's the one that drove you to the ranch. You want to talk to us about the process? I know getting there was getting there, and you probably were just trying to figure out what's going to happen next. But walk us through the phases you went through there at the ranch and with the guys that you were with, and just let us know a little bit the process you lived, because you were there for 90 days, right?
90 days. And just kind of give a quick backstory on what Denny said. The questioning of my love from my wife, and she'll tell you she dislikes. You probably say hate, and it would be appropriate when I ask her, "Do you still love me?" And she's happy now that for the most part, jokingly, it's turned to, "Do you still like me?" And that was something I asked multiple times a day, because I really questioned, if I didn't feel love for myself, how could another human being love me? Our relationship, I had no idea what that would look like coming out. In my mind, was so twisted. It was covered in cobwebs. I couldn't think straight. The very last text message I had sent to Rachel the day of going to detox, I mean, it took 2 hours to text, and I couldn't tell you really any of what it said, and she just knew it was jumbled and that something had to change. What Denny had asked me that night, what Pat had asked me, it said, you know you love your wife, right? And the most honest answer I could give was, I don't know. I said, if I loved her, it wouldn't look this way. And at this point, I felt like I'd exhausted my love for my kids. My kids no longer could keep me sober. The love that I felt for them, I began to question, like, man, if I really loved my kids, I wouldn't keep using every night. I wouldn't keep neglecting my family. And so that was kind of where my mind was with Rachel. I have no idea what this is going to look like. I have no idea if she's going to find another man in this 4 months that I'm going to, for whatever reason, now that I'm getting help, now it's time to bail out. And that's just how sick my mind, you know, was at the time. And so as we're going to treatment, I'd been good for 2 days. We'd talked on the phone. We'd texted quite a bit. And I had a lot of time to reflect with God, but I was angry. The whole trip, it's raining, and Rachel's doing the speed limit, and my mind is thinking, like, great, she just wants to drop me off at some treatment, some ranch where, everybody's going to be a cowboy and wear boots, and they're going to make me do all the work because I don't fit in. That was my exact thought. And so I was pretty angry and bitter, and we had, I think, about 2.5 hours to make it from treatment to the ranch, and she was getting straight there, and she may have, I don't know if she had asked me if we wanted to stop and get food, but I remember being hungry. And we're driving. I thought, great, she's not even gonna let me get food before I go in there. Like, they're probably not gonna feed me, so I don't even get that last meal. And as we're pulling up, a lot of that, we didn't speak for the hour and change that it took to get to treatment, and we're pulling in, and the bitterness is just coming out, and really, to me, I think it was a lot of release, because at this point I was grasping to find things to get mad about in this situation, and I was scared, and I just said, oh, you can't even take me to get food? And her loving sweetheart says, well, we can back out when you go get food. I'm like, no, we're already here, and that was kind of the ride to treatment. It was an interesting ride because, it's raining. I'm thinking, well, if she would go 45 instead of the speed limit, then, we could spend a little more time with me being mad with her.
Okay, so unpack the phases you went through. I know there were some really tough moments where you had to make decisions and make lists and things and open up and talk about who you were. And then later you got to see other men go through the same process and help them and help coach them, because some of the guys that were there before you coached you and helped you, along with some incredible counselors and people that walked alongside of you. But talk to us about what that looked like and how your relationship with God changed and the things that you started doing to completely start flipping that around, and those moments of intimacy with Him that started marking a new difference in your life.
So going in, we walked through the front doors, we walk up some steps, and there were men that would come up and ask you to carry their bags, and I thought, man, I've heard rumors, people take your stuff and you owe favors, or they're going to take all you have and they're going to dig through my bag and be wearing my shirt's going to come out. And I walk in, and there's a gentleman, and he has a leg brace all the way up, up to his hip. And I'm thinking, oh, great, this guy got in a fight, and that's probably going to be me. And, things weren't looking good from the very beginning. They take us around, and they show Rachel and I the facility and take us to the dorms and the cafeteria. And I'm thinking, man, this place looks really nice. They're like, oh, we have all these books you can get, books to read. And I thought, I really want to read. Like, I don't really want to do anything. So my second thought was, everyone was so friendly that I really thought it was a cult. I thought, man, they're going to slip me some medicine. And I see the end result. But I guess they're happy, so whatever. We'll go from there. And then what that process looked like. So that was kind of me on a base level. What that process looked like was the very first one-on-one meeting I had with my counselor. He just said, "Listen, you're a severe alcoholic, and you need help. It's okay to allow another person to help you." And he'd shared a story about Jesus and Simon. There's only 2 sentences in the Bible as far as out of Luke, and it's in a couple other chapters. But Jesus needed, in his physical body, for Simon to help carry the cross, because his physical body was weak. And a counselor said, you believe God is almighty? And I said, absolutely. Like, I don't really know what I believe, but I do believe that. And he said, do you think God could have called all the angels in the heavens as Jesus, as a man, to help carry the cross? And I said, absolutely. I understand authority, and this particular man had been in the military for 22 years, so I'm trying to use my best military lingo to impress them because I have an ego problem as well. And he said, he said, that's the thing about Jesus. He said, he came as a man to prove God's love, to prove his love for us. He could have done that, but he didn't. He chose to use help. That he needed help in a physical body. He said, what's different between us? He said, we need help as well. He said, and it's okay to let someone to help carry that cross, help carry your burdens. He said, because we're in this together. He said, none of us is that special that we can do it alone.
That's right.
And he said, the moments that I think I don't need somebody's help, he said, God quickly reminds me and asks me, do you think you're better than I am? And that stuck with me since then, because there are moments where you think you got it. You think you hit, and it's all too familiar. And I think back, 8-10 years ago, when I got it. I have this. I'm not, I don't have this part of my DNA. And it's like, no, it's still there. So that began my honesty. I've never had that real of an honest conversation with the first conversation I've had with someone up to this point. Now they're pretty blunt and honest. And it got real. There were things I swore I would take to my grave. No one would ever find out, and I couldn't stop talking. And he's like, I haven't even asked you a question yet. I'm like, yeah, but I figured you're going to ask this anyway at some point, so let's just go and start airing it out. And I think that session was supposed to be about 15 minutes, and it was about an hour and a half long. So that was just kind of the process of me being honest. There was so much hurt, and I was done with it. I was ready to surrender it. I didn't want to carry it anymore. And then the next process kind of looked like he sent a group with 40 to 50 men, sometimes 60 men, and you get in your guts, you get real, but you also realize you're not alone. You realize, most of this room have the same thoughts. Most of us have the same experiences. They just look a little different. The circumstances are a little different. The addictions are a little bit different. The hurting is different, but it's all the same. We're all people, and we're in this together. We're all piece of a puzzle. We all have equal parts, and when we come together, it looks like this. It's pretty beautiful. So that process just began to build. It began to me dumping more and more, and there were things that I'd suppressed so long with defenses that would come out in conversations. There were conversations with Rachel. At this point, she was coming down every weekend to get to see me on visits, and we were talking on the phone, and I thought, man, I really do love this woman. Like, she really stuck by my side through everything. The moments that I was ready to leave,
It's good.
that I would tell her I was ready to leave, that I was done, that I don't even think I liked, some really harsh things, and she still was there. And what that for me exemplified within that first week was just God's love of his faithfulness. How she did it was through him and by him. And I thought, man, I want that. I want to be that for my family, that no matter what they do, that I'm still the husband, I'm still the dad that God's allowed me to be.
Who did she remind you of when you start looking at her attitudes? Was like someone that's paid an incredible price for you?
Yeah. I got to make a phone call pretty quickly after a conversation on the basketball court, because I thought, basketball will rekindle this love. And I was out there, and of course I'm crying on the basketball court at this point. I can't shoot because my hands are wet from tears. And I said, she looks like Jesus. Like, this woman did exactly what Jesus did. He was there in my brokenness, and he wanted it. She wanted to be that for me. She wanted the hurt because we're in it together. She wanted, because she knew what the end result could look like. She knew that one day I could be sitting here sharing of God's faithfulness in our life when this was an impossible thought 5 months ago. Never imagined walking through the doors. Every time I came in, I thought, I'll just get to this place, and then I can approach Denny. Then I can approach Brenda. I can have these conversations with Justin or anyone else in this room. I tried to obtain it. I think this song shared it well. I can't earn God's love. I can't work to gain it. It's just there, and you take it. It's like, no, it's too good and too simple. Like, there's got to be a give. And it's like, no, you follow me, and that's it. And you get to live the best life you could live.
Mm-hmm. And after you did a lot of dumping, and I know a lot of guys took that opportunity. Now all of a sudden they started coming up with things to dump and everything else. But there had to be a switch at some point where you went from that to start building something, not just emptying yourself of things, but start building something in. And I know that some guys never get to that point, which is a sad situation. But when that transition happened, what did you start feeling the void and the emptiness with?
So I kind of have a problem with pleasing people. I like to look good in an image, but I also, if you give me a task, I want to complete it. But I want to go above and beyond to impress you when that's not what you asked for. I'll give a quick example. We would go to Walmart's on Tuesdays where we get to go like twice or get taken away. So the first week I go, I'm looking in the folder section because I'm thinking, oh, my counselor, he's going to give me a handout. So if I turn in the fanciest folder, it's really going to impress them. Like all the words are going to be scripted just nice. I'll have all the extra tabs. And in my head, I thought, no, because if I give him this, the folder this way, he's just going to give me a long list of how I'm very, I got to kill my ego, and I'm a narcissist, and, all these psychology terms. And I thought, yeah, I'll save that battle. Like yet again, that's kind of where I was at. So day 60, I shared, you're not discredited for things you say, as far as, they don't try to hold you back. You move, because when you mess up, it's you being honest and it's you being real most of the time. And I shared in the middle of a group, and I didn't feel like it was the right time to share. I realized it came off very phony, and it was me trying to impress a particular counselor because I was terrified of him. There's a group of gentlemen here that know the person that I'm talking about, and because he will make you get in your guts and you cry, and he's just wanting the best for you. And so I thought, if I can always impress him, if I can always share, like, he'll never dive into me like it, because it's there. And so at this point, 61 days in, I got used to dumping. That's what made me feel better, was being honest and sharing all the bad stuff about me. Well, it didn't work this time. And then I was really confused. I thought, God, like, I'm trying so hard. Like, I'm giving you everything I can. He said, no, you're not. Like, just sit back and listen. And so, after lunch, I went up to him and said, I apologize. I said, I don't think that was the right time to share. And not that you really care about what I shared, because there was nothing wrong with it. I said, I was just being phony and trying to impress you. And I said, that's just me being honest, and I apologize to you. And I'm thinking, like, what are you doing? You don't go up to apologize after you say things. And that day I went and took a nap, and I wasn't really big on taking naps. And I woke up from a dead sleep, and I heard an audible voice say, be still. And of course, I spring out of bed, and I just say, and know your God. Like, okay, I got it. And it made sense. So from day 61, that's made the biggest difference in my life, because from that point on, instead of sharing, it was me listening. It was me starting to apply what I was reading in the Bible. It was me applying the things that we were sharing in group, when we were saying, hey, I'll be your brother. I'll listen to what you have to say. I'll, walk down to the cross with you. I'll do all these things. I'll go search for the person that's isolating himself. I'll introduce myself to all the new guys coming into the ranch, and just love on them where they're at, because I was there too. When I started doing that, everything just kind of came full circle to me, and it was like, this is who you were created. These were the tools that you get. Now you just apply it. And then, you reach out and you pull the next guy beside you. There's a lot of aspects in AA, and they're great. And, one of the biggest things is, the newest person is the most important. It made me think a lot about church. I thought, man, guys that are just coming in, that have no idea, who are still in their addiction, love on them. Like, they need love right where they're at. And I think that made the biggest difference as far as the application process.
Well, and I think what you learned in those first 60 days helped, because the last 30 days, even the ranch was affected by COVID, and some of the counselors were limited in being able to come in and everything. And so it required you guys kind of, I know that was a hard journey for you to finish those last few days. And they were supposed to have a a special ceremony for you finishing where you could have some family members and other people there, and that was not possible because of that. So it didn't finish maybe the way you were expecting it to, but you completed it. You finished the course and you came home. And I know that you had come home previously for after an operation and everything. Talk us through a little bit of what the journey home felt like and what the reconnection was with family and the process that you went through with that.
Well, I'd never been so set, to leave a place. Leaving treatment hurt because I thought, there's individuals in this room that aren't going to make it. And that's a sad reality if they choose not to. And that hurts. And, I've heard a lot of the bad side of the story from people not making it, from choosing to go back in their addiction within, a day of being out of treatment. And I was just so grateful. I thought, I get to go home, and I'm terrified because I don't know what home's going to look like. I don't know what my relationships with all of my kids are going to look like. I don't know how Rachel and I are going to live with me in sobriety, with me in recovery. What's she going to hold against me? What's the outside going to hold against me? And all those thoughts are quickly diminished by A, this life isn't about me. And two, people are going to say and they're going to think whatever they want to think, and I have no power, I have no control over that. But what I can control over is me. I can control how much power I give to the next person. And those quickly went away. So really quickly it turned to excitement. Like, now I'm going to go be Trevan. Now I'm going to go be the dad God called me to be. Now I'm going to go be the person in my community that I want to be. To get to be the father that I want to be. And all those expectations that I've put on beforehand, they've got exceeded because now they're about God. They're not even about my wife. It's, God, how do you get glory out of this for me? Not speaking so harshly to my wife or being less smart aleck, not completely gone away yet. But
I know that the process, even with your older daughters, was a very delicate one. And you walked through that with fear and trepidation, but also I think with total honesty to them. And I think that carried a lot of weight in the process too. That as you came back, you spoke of your vulnerability and what you'd gone through. And I think that helped a lot in the process, didn't it?
It did. So I wrote, Michaela, our oldest daughter, who's 18, Rachel had wrote me a letter about a month before I went to treatment. Most honest letter I've ever read, and it was, I think, 10 pages long. It was thick in the envelope, so I knew I couldn't read it sober. So, of course, I did what us in our addiction do. You go out and use, and then you read the letter. Then that way, if I had to cry a little bit, I had an excuse, like, it's just the alcohol, whatever. And in the letter, it talked about each one of our kids and how my addiction affected mentally and physically each kid, and things that were going on in their lives. To see depression, anxiety, a total disconnect from me as a father. Kids that didn't want anything to do with me and my addiction. And it's like, how could I be so blinded? How did I not know this was affecting my 7-year-old son at school? I don't know. It was affecting my 15-year-old daughter down to her sports, where all confidence was gone. Her motivation and being that loving person was gone. Her oldest daughter not wanting to be in the same room with me. And that was pretty evident, to walk in a room and someone get up and leave, and you have no words to share. And so I wrote her a letter, and that letter has really become a testimony. I've shared it with a few individuals because it's as deep as a letter can get. It's as honest as a letter can get. I read it to Denny when I came home for surgery. So I went home thinking, like, I'll give this to Michaela and like hopefully her heart will change. Because as I went through this process, realizing how hurt I was, realizing how much hurt I'd caused in another person's life, I thought, I don't want a single person ever to hurt for another second. And we don't have to. You know, if I can give these tools to my daughter, we sit around and we have big groups. We have AA studies, NA studies, SA studies, which is sexual addiction. We have real honest conversations because they don't have to go through the same things. But should they? Obviously, I'm going to love them through it, but they at least have the tools to, to get out. And so that letter, those relationships have changed. To watch Mackenzie's relationship with God, to watch her confidence just rise within a matter of days of me going into treatment. And Rachel was driving her home. She actually came and visited me in treatment. And Rachel said, well, why do you think you're playing basketball so good? She said, I mean, I don't have to worry about Trevan. And that was the truth. Like, I didn't have to worry about where I was going to be at or what I was going to do. And that relationship with Michaela looks great. It's out of all the relationships I've had in this world, and having two stepdaughters, the dynamics of our family have always been diverse from the very beginning, and longing to be a father when you're not their dad has always been hard. That's part of my treatment was because I didn't know how to balance that emotion. I couldn't accept my place. And you get in there, you're like, all right, well, I know where my place is in our family at home, and that's what matters. That's who I need to be, and getting to be that now, getting to love all of our kids is a pretty amazing thing.
It's really cool. Relationship with Rachel is much improved also. The value that you've given her for what she's done, and more than just what she did, but the fact that she's loved you through the whole process, and your kids love you too. And there's good to see Dad back down with him. It's good. If you have, what's the message of hope and trust as you think about God and how He's the primary resource for you? What if you have something that you want to leave with everybody here this morning? What would that be?
I just kind of want to set the stage on probably what most nights look like for me. So when I use, alcohol was never supposed to be a part of our family. It's never going to be allowed in our house. So I sat outside for the better part of 4 years by myself and drank in my truck in the parking lot for 2 to 4 hours. And Rachel knew and felt one day I wouldn't come in the house, that I would die in my addiction in my truck. So for me, all the hurt every time, and I would testify every night that I would get ready to leave, our son would say, Dad, play a game of basketball with me. I'd give him a hug and say, we'll play tomorrow. You go to bed and I'll come check on you later. Our twins would ask me to hold them because at 2, they knew something was going on with Dad. And I couldn't hold them, though. I just felt love slipping through my fingers. And everything in me saying, just play that game of basketball. Just hold them for a little bit longer. Just go in there and grab Rachel's hand and tell her you love her. Go, make a joke towards Mackenzie. Go in there and try to start a conversation with Michaela. Just let her show you some music. And I couldn't do it. For me, the hope was essentially gone. Some of you are aware, as far as social media, what I tried to do was almost to bring hope to myself. Was I would post a picture every day with whether it was a random person or someone I knew, and I would just talk good about them. Kind of bring that positiviness to sometimes when social media doesn't do that. But that's what happens when you put hope in man-made things. And it worked really good. I think I had spurts of sobriety for days. And I would think, man, I'm doing the right thing. This positiveness is going to catch on. Well, the thing about emotions is they go away when it's not focused on God earthly things end. And it got to a point where it was hard to smile in those pictures, knowing whatever I was going to share about the person that was in the picture, I could no longer see that in myself. I could no longer find the kindness. And it was getting really hard to come up with those words, because now at this point, I was being so harsh, so only negative things were flowing through my mind. My addictions were, pretty much to the very end. And I had become suicidal. I shared with Denny, and I shared with Rachel in our letter that at this point in my life, I was terrified to go to sleep, but I was also terrified to not use alcohol to suppress what I was feeling, because I thought, well, if I drink too much, one day Rachel's going to walk out and I'm going to be hanging in a tree in our backyard. And I was terrified to look at cable cords, anything that you could make a noose. I was terrified if I ever blacked out that would be the end result. But I couldn't stop using, regardless of how bad it felt inside, regardless of how much pain I seen in my family's eyes, how much pain I would see in some of your eyes as, you run into somebody in the supermarket. And I have no words to say, because when you ask me, how you doing? Like, you don't really want to know the answer. But the truth is, you really do want to know the answer. And I was just in denial. Like I said, I was just really phony. Every time I would tell somebody I'm doing good in the morning time, I hated seeing other people because of having to lie. I told Denny the other day, I'm so glad I don't have to lie anymore. Because if somebody asks me how I'm doing, it might not be I'm good. It very well might be like, today's just, it's a day that I'm learning, how to get through, or I'm hurting, but I'm working through this. I'm learning how to live a normal life that the life that God's called me to live. And today it's still uncomfortable. So what the hope I'll leave with you, it's never gone. You're never too far into your addiction for God to love you right where you're at. There's no certain point that you have to get to before you get God's grace, or before you get someone in this room to just love you where you're at. The truth is, we're in this life together. We're not alone. Days that you're depressed, days that you're really hurting, it's okay. I hurt too. I want to hurt with you. As crazy as that sounds, I understand that now. I understand when God hurts with us, because he knows the end result is we get to celebrate like days today. Today is a day about this room celebrating for the faithfulness of prayers, the faithfulness of you being the church, because I get to be a product of that end result. And I'm very grateful, because I've got to see it in other men. I've got to see it in a group of men that came here today as they've gone through the journey, and they've gone through the journey with me. And that makes me so happy today to see guys that are surrendered. And that's what surrender looks like. This looks like surrender. There's not any foothold that I want the devil to have on me. But I'm not so focused on the devil. I'm focused on God being God and God doing God things.
Hallelujah. That's right. That's good stuff. Yeah.
And the very last thing I would like to share is, and I know I've already said it, it's not about me. That's what I got in there. They would say, you've been selfish all your life. Be selfish in this 90 days, but it's not about you. I thought, well, that makes sense. That selfish, but it's not about you, and it's not. It took me about 8 weeks to read in Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren. And all I had to do was read the first few words. It says, it's not about you. And what I've actually done in that is it says dash Michelle Meadows. The story I'll share is when we used to have a main event on Saturdays. I was playing in a basketball tournament, so I missed. And I come back to church on Sunday, and Chad and Michelle, Paco, they're just excited of what God was doing. And Michelle's like, oh, you missed. Oh, it was so good, And I said, all the good services happen when I'm gone. And I'll never forget the look on her face of how much it offended her. And she just says, well, it's not about you. And it stuck in my head. And that day I went, man, why didn't she just like break that to me like 10 years ago? And none of this, but no, not blaming her for that. But that's what's made the biggest sense. When I get out of the way, when I get out of myself, when I make life about God, when I make it about other people, it's pretty easy and it's pretty simple. That brings me hope, to watch other people's lives change. Whether they're an addict or not, doesn't matter. What they're into, I don't care. I just want to be a servant. I just want to love and share the message. Knowing I can't, it's not my job to change that person, but I can offer the same hope that I was given, because that's one thing nobody can ever take away from me.
Yeah. It's not complicated. And why do we make it so complicated? It's as easy as surrender. And you said that. It comes to that point where you finally say, I know I can't, but I know you can. And at that point is when he takes over and he shows you what he can do. And then he begins to journey the rest of your life together. And that's fantastic when you get to that point. And I just wonder how many people out here today are listening to you and saying, I've got a story that I could tell you about what I've gone through. But this is what we're about. This is what we're believing. We're not wanting just to be a place where we come and just share something good for a feel-good moment. We want you guys to understand that we want to celebrate what God is doing outside of the four walls of this place. That's where life is happening. It doesn't happen in here. Here we come with the purpose of one thing, is to worship him, but to celebrate what he has done in his faithfulness out there. And we want to see that happen more and more. We want to see people be able to come forward and say, this is something that I want to celebrate. I want to share with you what God's been doing in my life. I want to talk to you about how he's changed my life. I want you to hear how he's impacted someone else's life. Even as we heard this morning from Tony and Crystal also, the things that they've learned in their journey. And it has nothing to do with finances. It has nothing to do with anything that we might label. It has to do with his faithfulness. When we're obedient to him, when we listen to him, when we follow his advice, then these are the results of that happening. Trevan, you've got a family here that has been willing to walk with you in the past, but more so than ever now. And you know that my heart, my door, as well as everybody else's, is open to you right now. And I just want to say, welcome back from this journey. And I can't wait to see what the future holds in the rest of your journey. But I know this, he is with you every day and every moment. And we want to be there with you also in this process. Would you do something for me? Would you just pray over our congregation this morning? Would you pray over everybody that's here? Would you pray over those that are hurting, over those who are maybe anxious, those who have lost hope, those that don't know the Lord yet, that need to come to know him? Would you just pray a prayer of blessing over them, and a prayer of encounter, a prayer of opening up hearts, minds, and spirits to him? And would you just speak that? Because I think someone that has traversed and gone through this has a right and an authority given by the Holy Spirit, because you've done it the right way, to speak that life over people that right now are struggling with maybe their identity, maybe not knowing how to overcome certain things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, like you said, addictions can come in so many different forms. And they might be in that denial stage, that anger stage, all those other things that come with it. And they need to come to the realization that without him, they can do nothing. So would you just take a moment and just pray over us today? And if you're here this morning and you're one of those that I mentioned, would you just take a moment and bow your head? And as he prays this prayer over you, would you acknowledge and say, God, I'm one of those that needs for you to intervene in a very special and supernatural way, because dadgummit, I can't do it with myself. I've tried and haven't done so hot. Now I need more than ever for you to do it for me. You guys willing to walk through with this? Trevan, would you just do that for us this morning?
Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for your presence. Thank you for allowing us in your presence.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just go with a heart of gratitude. Lord, we hurt as long as we want to hurt. let our hearts be willing to surrender our physical addictions, Lord, our mental addictions, all of our anger, our resentment, Lord, our pride, our greed. Lord, let us be overcome by your love. Lord, that is the only way that we get to live the best life we can live is through you. Lord, there's an end to shame. There's an end to guilt. There's an end to sadness. Lord, and that comes with honesty. It comes with honesty with you, saying, God, I'm hurt. I'm in this addiction. Lord, soften the hearts of those in denial, that when the message is shared, Father, they don't build resentment towards you. All you've done is loved us. All you've done has been faithful to us. Lord, I just pray over every person in this room, Father, that you'll just stir your spirit, Father. That your fruit will just, it'll overflow, Lord, that it just has to fall from the trees, that we no longer contain the good things that you do in our lives. Father, that we're not ashamed of the message that you've put in our hearts. You've given us a testimony, Father. Our lives are so valuable. Father, without any person in this room, it's just a blank space. Thank you for creating us to have a relationship with you, to have good lives. Lord, just break down those walls. Break down the lies. Father, I see you climbing the mountains, Father. You will pursue us until our last breath. And I pray that our last breath is the beginning of the first breath with you, Lord, for all eternity. We are never too far gone, Father, because you are always ahead of us. Let us no longer look back to see if you're pursuing us, Father. You've got us. You've got us. Let us just give ourselves to you today, Father. All of us. Any character defect, Father, let us give that to you today. And let us no longer walk in it, Father. I just thank you again, Jesus, for what you're doing. Continue to heal our community. Continue to heal our world, Father. We're in this together, Father, because we're in it. We're in this because we were created by you to give you glory. And we just thank you, and we seal this in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.